Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples, and welcome back to 5 Minute Sociology. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite ideas from undergrad, Ferdinand Tonnies' Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. As always with this series, I'm going to explain this idea, give you some background on it, as well as some examples so you can show your professor that you're a total sociology rock star. We got a lot to do today, so what do you say we get started? Tonys writes about Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft way back in 1887, but these ideas are still important today. And today we translate them as roughly meaning community and society. And the way that Tonys would have been thinking about this was very much in the perspective of industrialization as people move from rural, less populated, but closer knit communities to these large, unknown cities where you don't know anybody. Now, Gemeinschaft refers to these smaller, close knit communities. I always like to think of them as places where people know your names, you know their names, your families have history, and you also understand, based on the norms of the time and your cultural norms, how you're supposed to behave. You don't need the rules and laws to tell you that. You understand how things work for your community. Translate that over to another extreme, Gesellschaft, where we've now moved into this large, unknown urban space where we don't really know anyone, and the relationships that we do develop are largely contractual. We no longer know the farmer who sells us our food. Instead, we buy them from a grocer who purchased them from someone else. May be relevant to my previous video on the stranger. Check that out in the 5 Minute Sociology series. And so we no longer have those close knit relationships, but rather contractual economic relationships. What's cool here is that Tonys would have been thinking about the norms in these situations. In Gemeinschaft, the norms that shape your behaviors are implicit. You understand the cultural norms. Whereas in Gesellschaft, we need laws, very formal statements of how you must behave to shape behavior. Let's dig into this just a little bit more to understand his perspective. You can see Tony's background all throughout Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. First off, thinking about the Gemeinschaft end of things, Tonys was raised in a wealthy agricultural farming family. He had the resources to have gone to college, but he also understood agricultural economics and what living in these small rural areas would have been like. But on the Gesellschaft extreme of things, he also was living in a period of rapid industrialization in Germany. As such, he probably saw firsthand some of his family members, friends, and more moving from these small, tight knit rural communities and suddenly arriving in cities where you knew nobody. Instead, you had to rely on contractual spending relationships. Also, remember too that German sociology was very fixated on some of these ideas at the time. Tony's was one of the first three big sociology founders in Germany, alongside Max Weber and George Simmel. And there they were thinking heavily about social interactions, but also about the political economy of the time and place. On top of that, Tony's was a huge follower of Hobbes, and he was a big believer in this idea that a social contract existed. And you can even see elements of the social contract in Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. How does the social contract change as we move from these tight knit communities to these less connected societies? Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft at the time were really providing a new lens for thinking about social change. So, this kind of falls in line with the idea that many of these early theories of sociology were about social change. Let's go to Gemeinschaft or community for a moment, where we think about the impact of being labeled as a deviant in a small community. If everyone knows you and you know everyone in this small, tight knit community, and you break some kind of social norm and are considered a deviant, that has some serious consequences about how people will treat you. But let's spin that on its head for a moment and let's pretend that you now break away from these tight knit communities where you implicitly understand how you should behave and move to a city. First off, the impact of the label of being a deviant kind of can go away. People don't really know who you are here. You don't have those long standing cultural ties that you find in Gemeinschaft. Instead, with Gesellschaft, or this broader society, you're now interacting with people largely on the contractual obligations that you need. Even though these ideas are from the 1800s, Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft are still important today because they give us a useful lens into social change and also the experiences that shape individual decisions. Again, those tight knit bonds in Gemeinschaft as opposed to those looser, more contractual and legal bonds in Gesellschaft. Thanks for watching 5 Minute Sociology. If there's an idea you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you next time. Take care.